So it's the beginning of November, and with this crazy weather we've had no frost here in the UK, and the dahlias are still going strong, as you can see. This is the Auretti bliss in the raised bed. But you'll be making a decision about how to deal with your dahlia tubers at the end of the season, and certainly a lot of people are deciding to cut down their dahlias even though they're now in full swing, so that they can deal with the tubers, get them out of the ground if that's what they're intending to do. So I thought I'd do a video now, not so much on the various ways of dealing with tubers at the end of the season. I've already done a video covering some of that, but I thought I'd talk about tubers in general and their physiology and how they behave, so that you can perhaps, with some understanding of what tubers are about and what their function is, you'll be able to decide how you want to deal with your tubers at the end of the season. So I'm going to cut down one of these Auretti bliss dahlias, and I'm going to dig out the tubers, and I'm going to have a talk about what's going on inside that tuber in a physiological, biological type of way. So first of all, just going to cut down the foliage from this dahlia. It's grown quite well in this raised bed, produced lots of flowers for us. Those are enormous stems, aren't they? This plant, Auretti bliss, at the beginning of the season, if you go back to early videos, these were single tubers. So a single tuber which I brought on in pots. So I got them warm sometime around about February or so they started growing, and then kept them in the pot so that they could put on a lot of growth before finally planting them out, I think at the around about the middle of May, and they've done very well indeed. I'll just show you something in close-up here. So I've just cut this plant down, and there's hollow stems in those 4 stems are hollow, and you can see straight away, without just having cut it down, that in fact we've got water filled. These stems are water filled, so each of these stems has water in it. And one of the dangers at this stage, let's say we cut the foliage down and then left it in this state for a while, which is quite common practice, to allow the tubers to mature a little before you get them out of the ground. And that water in the stem there is risking stem rot. So I'm going to take this tuber completely out, but if you did have the situation where you've already got water inside those stems, I'll show you a simple way of getting rid of that water. So I've zoomed right in, and hopefully now you can see the water there in the stem, and here's what we can do about it. Classically you'd use a wooden stake, a small wooden stake, but I couldn't find one, so I'm going to use a nail. And if you watch carefully, if I do go into the cavity, I've gone in now, and when I withdraw the nail, did you see, out comes the water? you do have to choose your spot a bit, because if I'm going to use a drill next, just to show you that you can actually use a hand drill. If you, for instance, tapped here, then you're leaving a lot of water down, because the water will fill the whole of the stem down to the next node. So I've got to go about here, and you can see there's the water coming out. So we've now got a hollow stem. So I'm just going to do the same with each of those. There's the water. And there's the water. So we've got nice dry interiors of those stems now, so they won't rot. Hopefully that was caught on video. While we're talking about water and stems and stem rot, the standard way of dealing with this, if you did remove the tuber from the ground at this stage, is simply to invert the tuber so that the stems are pointing downwards. Store them upside down, in other words, whilst they mature and dry out. So I'm working on the netting here, but that shouldn't prevent me from removing the tuber. So I'll just get in there now with... there's a choice at this stage. You can use a fork, it's probably the commonest method, to go around as far out as you think the tubers may extend to. So until you've taken the first one out, you don't know whether you've got a large tuber clump or a small one for that particular variety, because they all vary. So you're going to have to go really quite far out. So you can use a fork, and you simply go down and loosen the soil like so. Or because a fork can do damage, you can basically go straight through a tuber with the fork, and some advise using a spade. Now you can go straight through a tuber using a spade as well, but the sort of dynamics of it are that if you use a spade, as long as you're outside of the tuber mass, it doesn't then press into the tuber mass as you go down. So there's less trauma using a spade. I'm making some sounds here which sound like I'm going through tubers, but if that's the case, then they really are quite a long way out. So I'm going to lose a few tubers, but so be it. So I'm at a funny angle because I'm avoiding the netting here. So I've gone all the way around, and now I'm going to get hold of the stem and lever it up and sort of play around like so to separate the tuber from the soil as we go. Give it a bit of a shake and see what we've got. Okay. I'm going to now find a stick. The standard or the classical way of doing this, if it's not your finger to get rid of the excess soil, is to use a little stick. So I'll go and find one. Here we go, this cane should do the trick. So we've got quite a lot of soil clinging on to the tuber mass, and although I'm not going to take all the soil away, that's a choice you can make. If you want to use a hose at this stage to remove all of the soil, then that's a choice you can make. I tend to leave some of the soil on the tuber mass whilst the tubers dry a little bit and mature, and the soil protects them during that curing process for about a week, after which the soil will have dried out if you're storing them well, and you can then remove the rest of the soil with a hose. to get the tuber mass ready for storage. And I'm just inspecting as I go here to check that I haven't got any damaged tubers. The process of digging them out damage them sometimes, you cut through them and such like, or any diseased tubers. So if there were any disease there, you can see that they're soggy and obviously not firm, usually discoloured. Then you must remove those straight away because the rot can spread to other tubers. So this is quite a nice tuber mass. I'm being a bit fussy there about how I'm doing that. I'm leaving some soil on, remember, intending to do that. So that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's now ready to go into top-down a space which is dry and to allow the soil, to allow the tuber skins to harden a little, and to allow me to go on to the next stage, which is to consider how I'm going to store the tuber, whether I'm going to divide them into singles, whether I'm going to divide them into 3 or 4 tuber clumps, or whether I'm going to leave it like this and store it exactly like this and plant that intact next year. So I'm going to put this alongside my other babies, and this is inside the polytunnel, so it's nice and dry in here and it's not too warm at the moment. We've cooled down a little, even though it's November. It's been crazy heat. So there's my upside down tuber mass, where it will now dry out nicely. But I am going to do one other thing, and that is to remove one of these tubers so that I can talk about it in the propagation room. So I'll do that now. So I'd normally leave well alone now and let this mature, but because I'm going to have a talk about tubers and their physiology and their function, I'm going to dig down and see if I can remove this single tuber here from the mother tuber. I think this is the mother tuber. It's difficult to tell sometimes. Often they're darker in colour and obviously older looking, but in this case, because there's so much soil, etc., I'm not absolutely sure that's the mother tuber. But this tuber, which I'm after removing, there is a swelling. So that's the body of the tuber. There's the neck, if you can see down in there, I hope. Just check that the camera can actually see it in there. So there's our body, there's our neck, and that there, area there where it attaches to the mother tuber, is the head. So I'm going to try and remove it from there. Hopefully I'm not going to do so much damage that I introduce disease into the tuber clump. And because I'm only talking about it, it doesn't matter whether I actually get an eye or not here, but classically that's what we'd be trying to divide it in such a place as it enters the mother tuber, so that you preserve an eye, or sometimes more than one, because that's where the shoot will come from next year, as you will know. So there we are. So I've removed that by hook or by crook, and we'll go now into the propagation room and have a chat about what's going on inside that tuber. So we've got our tuber, which is a storage of energy for next year's growth, we've got an area of this tuber which has the potential to become a new plant. And what the plant requires is for some time to pass during the winter months when there's no growth potential because there's not enough light and not enough heat. For this plant to rest during that time, in other words, not to try to grow. So there has to be some form of trigger which informs the plant now is the time to start to grow. And the trigger for most, or for many plants anyway, in particular, and for dahlias, is heat. So if we can keep this tuber at a low temperature, then it will not be stimulated into growth, which is what we require for storage over winter. And the temperature is around about 10 degrees centigrade or so. So anything above 10 we'd call warm, and anything below 10 we'd say is cool enough to suppress the physiology of the plant to form energy. When it comes time to stimulate it into growth, as you know, all we do is warm it up. So put it on if it's still early in spring or late winter, when you want to start it into growth, January or so in the UK, in the Northern Hemisphere, then you put it on a heat mat. So at 20 degrees centigrade, that will get all the metabolic processes working. The inuin storage of energy will be converted to fructose, the enzymes which are stimulated into activity due to temperature rise. They will make available that fructose for the plant to begin its growth cycle. So all that's true. One of the danger when we're growing these for cultivation purposes is that we're interfering with nature. We're getting the plant out of the ground. We are hoping that the tuber will remain intact. And some of the dangers to tubers in the early phase certainly is drying out. So we've got a tuber here which is exposed to the atmosphere, and evaporation is taking moisture away at this very moment. One of the protections against that is the skin. So the skin will be required to harden for a little while in order to put it in the best possible condition, and that's why many growers, me included, will take the tuber out of the ground and then leave some of the soil on it, and that soil will protect to some degree from drying out, whilst there's time for the tuber to mature, for the tuber skin to mature, so that it loses less moisture. So drying out is one danger. Another danger is to allow heat to get to the tuber, which stimulates growth at the wrong time, which we've already talked about. And the other great danger is disease. So a nice intact skin on the tuber and a healthy intact skin will, to a large degree, protect against external disease agents such as bacteria or fungi from entering that tuber. If there is some damage, and at this early stage it's often there, it's easy for me to damage the skin simply by pressing on it, because the skin is immature. The skin is not firm enough to resist that simple trauma. So if you do damage the skin of your tubers whilst removing them, then one of the barriers against entry of disease has just been removed. So try not to traumatize. If you did traumatize a tuber whilst digging them out, then you should remove that tuber, as much of that tuber as possible, because once disease gets into one tuber, it's inside the plant and it can then spread throughout the internals, if you like, of the plant system. Some tubers are very small and risk drying out quickly because simply their volume, and other tubers are are very large, so that there's less risk of drying out in those cases. When you do come to store your tubers, you'll be deciding how to do that. Everyone's got their own way. Some people are quite vociferous about the only way to do it. So I've heard people say you cannot store tubers in plastic of any sort because they'll rot. And other people say I always store mine in plastic because otherwise they dry out, etc., etc. But the principles of this is to keep the temperature below 10 degrees. A little lower than that is ideal, and also to maintain the humidity around the tuber so that it doesn't dry out. And the usual way of doing that would be to use, well, in past days we used moist peat, but hopefully none of us are using peat now. We're all peat free, so the choices are between vermiculite, sand, shavings, wood shavings. You can use soil, and then in a storage box, whether that be cardboard or wood or metal or plastic. All of these, of course, have different characteristics of allowing drying out. So you certainly mustn't try to store tubers in a very dry condition. So during the winter, when they're being stored, you'll be checking on your tubers and make sure that they're not doing one of two things: either drying out, in which case you need to add moisture and protect from moisture loss, or else becoming diseased, in which case you must get them out of the storage vessel immediately before they infect other tubers. So that's all I wanted to say about tubers and why people have different ways of protecting the tuber during winter. I mean, what we do here on the farm is to store them in various ways. So I'll cut quite a lot down into single tubers and wrap them in cling film like I did last year. There's a video on that. And others I will store the complete tuber mass in some form of a damp, cool storage. I haven't yet made my mind up, but most likely that will be wood shavings, newspaper in aerated cardboard boxes. So thanks very much indeed for listening to that, and I'll be digging out my tubers, all my tubers out soon, and we can have another chat at that stage about how I intend to store mine, and give you some suggestions for what you need to consider when making your decision how to store yours. So thanks very much indeed for listening again, and bye bye for now.